Welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host Molly from the blog and YouTube channel Plum Branch Home. Today we are diving into how sourdough is not a hassle. It's actually really easy. You just need to know the right information. So I am sharing all of my tips, all of my tricks, and of course the easiest way to do sourdough. It seems like everybody that I talk to either is intimidated by sourdough or they've tried it and their starter has died, or a lot of people just think sourdough is too much work. It's too much. You have to feed it, you have to maintain it, you have to bake with it all the time. That is all true, but it's also not true. With the right information, your starter can take as little as 5 to 10 minutes a week. I am not kidding you. If you put your starter in the fridge and store it in there, you only have to feed it once a week. I think a lot of people leave their starter out on the countertop, and when that happens, you have to feed it every single day. Sometimes when it's in the summertime, you have to feed it even 2 times a day, every 12 hours. That is a lot of time. That is a lot of work. Even like I cook all the time and I bake all the time, but that is a lot of work even for me. I don't know who is doing that unless you have a bakery. So for most people, I just tell them, put it in your refrigerator and feed it once a week. You're gonna see hooch on the top, which is just a layer of a liquidy grayish substance. That is not mold. That does not mean it's gone bad. That simply means that your starter is hungry. That is going to happen. You can leave it for a little while, a few days after that happens, and then once a week, say pick one day. So say you pick every Saturday, you're gonna get your starter out, you're gonna feed it, and sometimes you're gonna use it to make bread, tortillas, or pancakes, just something simple. And that is all you have to do. So I wanna share this in a very simple way where when you're listening to this podcast, you have all of the information you need from start to finish, and you can understand how simple sourdough can be, because it really is simple and it can change your life. It can save you money. It gives you really good gut benefits for your health. And it is so easy. It gives you a skill that I think everybody needs. Everybody should know the skill of baking their own bread and making their own bread products, because it saves so much money and you don't have all of the garbage that's in the food in the grocery stores. So let me break this down in the simplest way possible. First, you're going to either make a starter or get one from somebody else. Making a starter is really simple. I have a free guide down in the description of this podcast episode that you can go check out. It is completely free and it walks you through the entire process. It is my process that I use to make my starter, and I've helped other people make theirs. So definitely do that if you want to make your own. So that's your starter. Once you have created that starter, then you are going to feed it once a week, because you're going to store it in the refrigerator. So pick one day a week. Say a Saturday is a great day. So pick one day a week. You're going to feed it on that day. You're going to feed it a 2-to-1 ratio of unbleached flour and filtered water. And there's a reason. You do not want to use sink water for your starter. It can kill it. If you have reverse osmosis and you use salt for like a softener, the salt content in your water can actually cause a disruption for your starter and can weaken it. So I always recommend using bottled water, or you should use a filtered water. So I just have a pitcher of filtered water. We live in town, so I just filter our water out and then I'll use that. We use it for our drinking anyway. So yeah, you want to use filtered water, and then it is important to use unbleached flour. You can use regular flour, but it's going to weaken your starter, or you might have problems later on. So I always recommend unbleached. It's about the same price as regular flour. It's not organic. You can find organic unbleached at places like Costco, Walmart, Kroger. I do that, but you do not have to get the organic. You just need to get an unbleached flour, and this is just unbleached all-purpose flour. So you're gonna do 2-to-1 ratio, meaning 2 parts of unbleached flour to 1 part of filtered water. You're going to feed your starter this 2-to-1 ratio once a week, and for an example, it's going to kind of differ depending on how large of a starter you have. But for an example of this 2-to-1 ratio, say a good one that I tell everybody to kind of use is do 1 cup of flour, a half of a cup of water. That is the 2-to-1 ratio. So it's just double the flour of the water. So the example is 1 cup flour, half of a cup water. You could apply this to 2 cups of flour, 1 cup of water. You could even, if you have a smaller starter, you could do half of a cup of flour and 1/4 of a cup of water. But the standard that I tell everybody is just do 1 cup of flour, half of a cup of water. I hope that makes sense. I will review this here at the end. I promise I'll make a review of all of these things I'm talking about, just to make it simple and clear and clean, but that is the feeding ratio. So no matter how big your starter is, you can do that 1 cup flour, half of a cup water, and you can do that a few times. So say your starter is huge and you want to keep about half of your jar full of starter. Maybe that 1 cup flour, half of a cup water isn't enough and it only made about 1/4 of your jar. You can double that and keep doing the 1 cup flour, half of a cup water multiple times to get it to the amount of starter that you want in your jar. I always recommend only feeding your starter so it fills up half of your jar. That way it has room to rise and ferment. Otherwise, it's going to bubble over and make a huge mess. I've been there. So that is the feeding. Once you have fed it that 2-to-1 ratio, you're going to let it sit out on the countertop for about 4 to 6 hours. This is very, very important. You need your starter to kind of be able to ferment at a room temperature before you put it in the refrigerator. So just to review this feeding and maintenance care, I'm going to list them out just really, really quick so that you know how simple and easy it is. As soon as your starter is established and created, you've already made your starter, you are going to keep it in the fridge, pull it out once a week, feed it a 2-to-1 ratio of unbleached flour to filtered water. This is an example of 1 cup of flour, half of a cup of water. You're gonna dump that into your starter jar, mix it together, scrape down the sides, and then sit it out on the counter for about 4 to 6 hours so it can get fermenting at room temperature, then put it back in the fridge, and that's all you have to do. Now, if you would like to make something with your starter, this is how you're gonna do it. So after that 4 to 6 hours, you can use your starter, and that's fed starter. So after you feed a starter and it's fermented for a minimum of 4 hours, it is ready to go, and it's called a fed starter. If you use it when you get it right out of the fridge before you feed it, that's called a sourdough discard or an unfed starter. And you can use that in things from cookies to cupcakes. You can even use it in scones and tortillas. But if you want to make something that needs a rise, like bread, bagels, that kind of thing, you need to use that fed starter that's already fermented. Now, if you're going to use that starter and not put it in the refrigerator, what you're going to want to look for is that starter needs to have risen a little bit in its jar, and you need to have active bubbles in there. So you'll see little air bubbles all over. That indicates that your starter is ready to go and it will rise your baked treats. So that is how you take care of a starter, maintain it. It is so simple and easy. It is not a hassle at all. If you don't want to make anything with your starter and say your jar is overflowing and it's more than halfway, but you don't have time to make something, or maybe you don't want to make something, you can just take out like half of a cup of your starter and then you can toss it away. I don't love doing this, but say you are in a pinch, you are so busy, or maybe you've had so many baked treats and you don't want any more, just take a little bit out, throw it away, and then that way your starter has room and you don't have to worry about using it. So that is an easy way to do that. With your sourdough starter, there are 3 options of care. So the first option is the one that a lot of people get overwhelmed with, which is keeping it on the countertop at room temperature and feeding it once to twice a day. So that's option 1 that I don't recommend. The second option is storing it in the fridge and using it once a week. That is the option I recommend. You could use it for making a loaf of bread every week or tortillas, and you wouldn't have to buy those anymore. The other option is storing it in the fridge and feeding it just once a week and not using it. So just discarding a little bit, not using any starter, and putting it back in the fridge. The first option of storing it at room temperature and feeding twice a day, with that you're gonna have to use your starter at least once a day. So you're gonna be making something. So that's probably half an hour a day minimum to do that. That's why I don't recommend it. And that is the option that it overwhelms people and makes people so stressed. So I don't recommend that, and I really would toss that out. So the second option of storing it in the fridge and feeding it once a week and using it once a week, that will take you anywhere from 15 minutes to 30 minutes a week. So that's if, say, you want to make sourdough bread, it seriously takes only 15 minutes of hands-on time. The recipe is going to be like 15 hours, but all of that is just the fermentation of your bread dough on the countertop. So all you do is it takes 2 minutes to measure everything and put it in a bowl, 5 minutes max. You'll mix everything up. And then for the bread recipes, there's just a stretch and fold that takes 1 minute each. There's 2 of them. So that's 5, 6, 7 minutes. Then you're going to let your dough ferment on the countertop for about 12 hours. Then you're going to shape it. So that, say, maybe 5 more minutes. So that's 12 minutes. 7 plus 5, that's 12. And then after you shape it, it's going to proof for about 3 to 4 hours. So that's where all of this time goes in. And then you're just going to stick it in the oven. So like 12 to 13 minutes is all it takes to make homemade bread. It just feels like it takes a lot longer because of the fermentation process and the timing on the recipes. So don't let that scare you. So at lunchtime, what I like to do at lunchtime. Just take 10 to 15 minutes before you get your lunch started on Saturday and get your starter either fed and put back in the fridge or fed and use it for lunch. You can do that and it will take 10 to 15 minutes of your time. It's so simple and so easy. And then that third option of just feeding your starter and discarding a little bit so you have room, that is going to only take you about 2 minutes. So it's either 30 minutes a day, 15 minutes a week, or like 2 minutes a week. That's your options. It's so simple and easy. It's not hard at all. Don't let anybody overwhelm you or tell you it's too hard. If you've been wanting to do sourdough for a long time, please do it. Just get started and say, yes, I'm doing this. Because when I first heard of sourdough, it took me 3 months to get into the sourdough baking process. And I wish I would have started right away. I was scared. I was intimidated. I was like, I can't keep this thing alive. And that is why I made all kinds of guides. So if you're worried about keeping your starter alive, if your baked goods are dense, if your bread's dense and you feel like you can't bake that kind of stuff, I have a free guide as well that I'll leave down in the description of this podcast episode. It walks you through all of the troubleshooting. I have all of my tips and tricks in there so you're not doing this alone. Just know that starting sourdough is a blessing. It is a lifelong skill that you are going to be so grateful that you started, and it saves so much money, not to mention all of the great benefits to your health. So I hope this episode was really helpful for you. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments of this podcast episode. You can message me on social media. We are on Pinterest, Instagram, and Facebook. I hope this took a lot of the stress and overwhelm and overthinking out of the sourdough baking process, and it will help you get started. Until next time, bring life into your home through the kitchen.